Let's move on. Topic number 2. All right, I'll start with you, Meg, on this one. In your estimation, who is the most influential sports figure of our time?
Well, the way that I kind of broke it down was into 4 categories. The most important one being, did the person change society, be a role model, influence in that kind of way? The second one was, are they an ambassador for their sport? Did they grow the sport? The third is individual stats, and the fourth would be, did they win? So my overall person for who influenced the most was Wayne Gretzky.
And because of what he did in hockey, and how does that transcend beyond hockey into affecting society?
Okay, so I'll look at the first one, for instance, how he affected society or was a role model. He's been a role model for kids for years and years and years, to the point where 5-year-olds are still wearing his name on their back, even though they never watched him play. You look at some of the other greats of all time, and they all had a tainted past, or most seem to have a tainted past. The only thing that Gretzky's ever been involved in was the gambling ring, where he managed to clear his name from it. Turned out that just his wife was involved, along with Rick Tocchet, but that's the only thing that's really tainted his past. So all in all, he's been a great role model. Also, he's been great with charities. He's been huge with charities. He has his Wayne Gretzky Foundation that allow kids to play hockey and to have that luxury. So I think that he's been a huge role model for that support.
Sean?
As much as I like Wayne Gretzky, Megan, I have to disagree. Michael Jordan is definitely my pick as the athlete who has been able to transcend sport, simply on the fact that he is a worldwide phenomenon. It was pretty much a perfect storm when Michael Jordan started to come into the league and started to come into his own. He had obviously, the ability to do everything on the basketball court. Before he won a championship, he was a Defensive Player of the Year in 1988. He had won Rookie of the Year in '85. He was leading the league in points per game for several years. But the biggest thing was, once he was able to get out there and the boom of media changed, whether you're talking print, also television, things really changed. And Michael Jordan was able to have a worldwide exposure and having a true effect on the game of basketball. The '92 Summer Olympics in Barcelona, that changed the face of basketball. A lot of players right now are looking at Michael Jordan as the reason why they're playing the game. Dirk Nowitzki, one of his favorite player of all time. He's essentially the reason why he's playing basketball in a country that is soccer driven. I really think that Michael Jordan is the echelon and, the epitome of a person who has had the ability and did transcend sport.
You want to jump in?
Yeah, I have to disagree, because Michael Jordan didn't have the squeaky clean past. He was a womanizer as well. So I think because of that, you're not the best role model. And as far as TV goes, it was Johnson and Bird that brought up the TV ratings. Michael Jordan came after that.
Michael Jordan came after that, but he changed the game. Magic and Bird had their rivalry in college, and it helped going in towards the NBA. And the NBA was desperate for something at that time. But Michael Jordan, on his own, with his ability to win championships, win MVPs. He is a 6-time champion, 5-time MVP, 14-time All-Star. He retired a total of 3 times now. I mean, Michael Jordan's been retired for 7 years. The guy gets more Google hits still than the country of Jordan. Essentially what I'm trying to say is that Michael Jordan is just at a level that other athletes, other than maybe Muhammad Ali, we haven't seen that as far as transcending culture. And, you've got athletes like Dwayne Wade and Derek Jeter who are, really brands on their own. They could do their own thing, but they're choosing to continue the Jordan legacy.
But I just wonder about the influential side of things, and whether, when you talk about transcending the sport, did either one of these truly transcend the sport, or were they just great players in their own area of expertise? And I just, when I think about people transcending the sport, I'm talking about people who have the kind of influence that I'm not sure either Jordan or Gretzky had.
Wayne Gretzky, this was kind of my next point, was as far as being an ambassador for the sport and everything like that, when he went to LA, people were lining up to buy their season seats. A stadium that had never been sold out before, all of a sudden was selling out crowds, had standing ovations, and within a decade, he was the one that moved the league from 21 teams to 30 teams. And if that's not influencing a league, then I don't know what is. Also, he had his own rule, right? Like, in the 80s, they had to make the Gretzky rule so that the Oilers couldn't play 4-on-4 because they dominated too much. So if that's not changing and influencing, then I don't know what is.
If you're going to talk about the morality side of things, you mentioned Jordan versus
Yeah.
Gretzky. Is it fair to just brush off the gambling allegations and the gambling ring and say, well, it was only his wife involved?
Well, he still recovered from it, is kind of my point of it. Because
So is Jordan.
yes, but I think it was more serious with him. Wayne never really had his name attached to it too much. It was his wife, and it was kind of all said right off the bat that, I knew that they were doing it, but I wasn't the one doing it. And I find it fascinating that through all these years, no matter what's happened, he's always managed to stay up here. And he is the great one. So I think he's just one of the biggest role models and a leader.
Meg brought up the way that Gretzky influenced the game itself. Do you really think that Jordan had that sort of impact on the game of basketball? Is basketball different today because Michael Jordan played in it?
I honestly do believe that the game of basketball is different today, mainly in the way that players play the game. Michael Jordan reinvented his style of play, wasn't driving to the basket as much later on in his career, developed a fadeaway shot. You have athletes like Kobe Bryant who've essentially modeled their game after Michael Jordan, who is arguably the best current NBA player. And I think that in order to, really look at what Jordan has done in the game, you just have to look at the success he's had up until now, whether you're talking, championships, the legacy he's left behind for the Chicago Bulls and the city of Chicago as well. I just feel that what he's been able to do on the floor and his exposure worldwide, David Beckham, who's a soccer player, came to the LA Galaxy. The reason he wore 23 is because of Michael Jordan. Another David Beckham is his own brand, his own player. He could wear whatever number he wanted. But when he came to the United States to, kick off the MLS and try to bring them a buzz, he decided to wear number 23. When people say, there's a common phrase that says, people will say, the Michael Jordan of someone's profession. That's just the ultimate compliment that someone could be given. And I just think that he's been able to, transcend and cross over at all types of markets.
All right, let's get to the final point. Sean, I'll have the first word on that. Okay. Is it time for Major League Baseball to expand its use of instant replay?
I really do, because at this point in time, we saw just a couple months ago in the month of May where the Tigers' Galarraga had a perfect game taken away from him by Jim Joyce's missed call. And really, that's something that shouldn't have happened. It's a shame. It's an incredible feat to even be in a situation to have a perfect game. And for something like that to have been taken away by a missed call, a human error, those are the kind of things that could potentially happen in a World Series classic game. And you don't want a team to lose a championship or a game that could get a team into the playoffs by a missed call. I think that using replay only to verify if it's a home run, I think there needs to be an expansion.
I completely agree. It's sad that at this day and age, there's not that, the technology is there. They got to use it, especially with the perfect game. Technically, he had a perfect game +1 because he had to get that one last out as well. And it was heartbreaking to watch Galarraga just go, are you kidding me? I didn't get it. And to pitch a perfect game is so hard to do. There's been only just over 20 now, I believe. So, your heart just goes out to him. And I understand that the commissioner wouldn't look at it because then he would have to look at a lot more things. But at this day and age, where there's so much technology, you have to look at that stuff.
All right, so it's the World Series, and it's a 3-2 count, 2 out. The pitch is way outside. Umpire calls a strike. Game over. You go and review that?
That's where it gets sticky. I think for outs you have to do it, but I think that when as far as base running and everything like that, but I think that as you have to trust the ump behind the plate for that one.
So how do you set the rules?
You would have to set it so that any pitching stuff, that's not covered, but anything that's on base, whether or not it's out or safe, or when it comes to a perfect game, you have to be able to review that, or the commissioner has to be able to say, you know what, I think we should review this one. And I thought it was kind of cheap that he didn't do it.
But you said earlier that you thought that if he reviewed that, then all of a sudden he's got a whole bunch of other things to review. So
I think that's what's going on through his mind, and I think that's why he didn't do it. But so I understand that side of it, but at the same time, you just ruined this kid's perfect game.
So should the commissioner have reviewed it and changed it?
Absolutely.
Sean, where do you draw the line here?
That's a tough question, Greg. I mean, I hear totally exactly what Megan's saying, and there's going to be subjective calls, like you had mentioned with the pitch outside. And once you start getting into that, baseball games are already long. So to go and review all these types of calls on a one-off basis would be very tough. So there really would have to be discussion as to what things you really said are 100% reviewable and other things that are not. I mean, in hockey and football, even basketball, there's only certain things that are actually reviewable. The rest of the stuff, it happens within the lines of the playing field, and the umpires or the referees are the ones that you have to live and die by that call.
So how would you set the parameters?
Good question. I guess I would start by saying outs on base, whether you're talking, running it out first base, or whether or not there was a legitimate catch, in the outfield, or foul ball, those kind of things that are pretty much, kind of concrete. But when you're talking about pitches, that definitely does get very subjective, because you could have the pitch that's completely outside of the strike zone, but then there could be something that's right on the corner, and maybe the ump does the opposite and calls a ball. That would be very tough to do. I think you have to stick with outs, home runs, and maybe just leave it at that. Not try to change things too much in a hurry.
Unlimited use of replay in the game outside of balls and strikes?
I would be willing to say that.
So if a manager could review every call at every base?
Would not be the manager to make the call. I think they'd have to set something up where it came from upstairs, or maybe in the NFL where managers or coaches have a limited number of challenges, or calls within I don't know. It would be tough, but I think that you would have to have a set parameter where you only could have a certain amount of things reviewed. I don't think you would be able to say that every manager would be able to come out of the dugout waving his hat saying, I want to review that call. There definitely would have to be some certain parameter set.
Where would you set the parameters?
I would agree with that as well, with the challenge flags, because it's working so well in other sports, and baseball seems to be the sport where they're just the most set in their ways. It's an old school sport, and I think that they just kind of have to relax a little bit. Like, look at the NHL. Any goal that's questionable goes right to Toronto to figure it out. So if it's an instant replay like that for the outs, absolutely do it. But I like the challenge flag idea, because
Here's the problem with baseball and challenge flags. In the NFL, you get charged a timeout if the play is upheld. What do you do in baseball?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess in baseball, I don't know that there could be a penalty in baseball for it, because if you get one every inning, even, which might be a little excessive, that might be too many. But if you were to do that, then I don't think that it would tie up time too much. And I think that as long as it was absolutely instant replay and that the decision was made right there, it really wouldn't slow the game down.
So how many challenges would you give?
I'd give maybe 4 or 5 a game.
You agree? Is that what you would do?
The challenge, being able to give coaches the ability to challenge, I think that you would have to come up with a certain number. But I think what may end up happening outside of that would be that the umpires would be the ones that would have to, go under the hood, so to speak, and make that challenge call for certain plays. Like I said, outs, catches, certain things that are kind of finite right now, and just leave it at that. And maybe you don't have the managers involved at all.
Jean-Francois, Meg Morrison, this has been Gillette Drafted Head to Head.